War in Europe. Inevitable. I always point the wrong way. I point towards the closet. Bam. Right there. Emergency broadcast. Summit yesterday, Sunday, March 2nd. Notice how everything's happening in March these days, right? These past couple of years, COVID, World War III, potentially. I'm pretty sure March is also one of the times that the Chinese Navy can cross the Taiwan Strait. I think it's March and October. Just throwing that out there. Oval Office. Everyone loses their minds. J.D. Vance and Trump double team Zelensky. Kick him out. Send him back on a plane. Well, I guess he probably went the next day because he went on Fox News later that night and was talking about how unfair everything was. Well, not really. I mean, he kind of apologized. A little bit. Not like a lot of it, but a little bit. I mean, he was like, my bad. I want peace. But then he goes to Europe. President Zelensky flies to Europe. And the Europeans who have been in debt trouble since the 2008 financial crisis, keep that in mind, are backing him and saying that they're going to fill in the void because it's really seeming like NATO died on Friday. Died a death in the Oval Office. And I mean, it's important that we get this point across because the mainstream media is not covering this at all. Shocking. Not really. I think they don't want to cause panic. If people really saw stories that were, if the New York Times is running a story that said World War III or major war in Europe inevitable or imminent, I think you see a lot of panic going on. That's why you're not seeing it covered like you are here on Afternoon Coffee. Historic parallels, which are never good, specifically to the 1930s. Whether or not Putin is a Hitler character, I think remains to be seen. But they're certainly treating and acting like he is one. As far I'm talking about the European leadership. They think that once he's done with Ukraine, he's going to continue to right historical wrongs, as he puts it, Putin, and just mow through the rest of Eastern Europe, Iron Curtain, reestablish the Soviet Union. That's what they believe he's out to do, is to reestablish the Soviet Union. I think that remains to be seen. The invasion of Ukraine, is that the start of something more? Possibly, maybe, potentially. I've always thought personally that the Russian response in Ukraine stems back to the United States meddling. Oh boy. That's why we moved the show to Rumble. No, I'm just kidding. The United States meddling in Ukraine. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the 2012 Maidan coup. We orchestrated that. Senator John McCain, Victoria Nuland. Look it up. You'll find it. That turned into a rebellion, insurrection in the east of the country, where most of the citizens are Russian speaking, and some of them like work in Russia. There was a lot of cross-border contact commuting, things like that. But they ethnically probably identified more with Russia than Ukraine. They took the rebellion, or the Maidan coup as an opportunity to break away. Because originally, if you remember back, these were breakaway republics. It was the Republic of Donetsk and the Republic of Luhansk. And there was a lot of, now the Europeans, all of a sudden, the Ukraine war started in 2014. I think Trudeau said a comment like that yesterday. I mean, he's not one of the European leaders, but he is, he's a leader of a part of the Commonwealth, and that, that's the United Kingdom.
They chose to violate the existing ceasefire and invaded Ukraine with the intention of taking Kyiv in 3 days and the entire country in 3 weeks. That has failed. On Friday in the Oval Office, President Zelensky pointed out, in so many words, that Vladimir Putin is a liar and a criminal and cannot be trusted to keep his word in any way, shape, or form, because he has demonstrated time and time again that he will break any agreements. I stand with Vladimir Zelensky, and I stand with the people of Ukraine.
He didn't quite say it in that clip, but in another article I saw that he said Russia started the war in 2014, which is not true. I think Russia took Crimea in a sort of shady way back then, but I don't think they had troops on the ground in like eastern Ukraine. Like they weren't directly fighting eastern Ukraine in 2014. That's rewriting history, unfortunately, Mr. Trudeau. I remember. We have long memories here at the DT show. So yeah, Trudeau rewriting history, attempting to with his comments saying that the Russian war with Ukraine started in 2014. It did not. It started in 2022. They're doing this so that this incredibly destructive, possibly World War III inducing European war that they're trying to do right now, they're trying to justify it by saying that, you know, Russia was at war with Ukraine. Yeah, the ceasefire was between Ukraine and the like rebels in the east. It wasn't with Russia. I'm not even going to try to like look it up on Wikipedia or an article because I know they're burying it at this point. But I remember what happened. You can't memory hole this one. And there's enough people out there that also remember what happened and are saying the same thing, that they're lying. They're lying at 1,000,000 miles an hour to justify a war. Where have we seen this before? Huh. I wonder. Where have we seen a country lie at 1,000,000 miles an hour to justify a war? I don't know. Let's take a look. Let's way back machine. This is from 2004 from The Guardian. New York Times, we were wrong on Iraq. They had the big fancy headline, weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq. We need to invade, take down Saddam Hussein, all that jazz, all that nonsense. That was shown to be a lie and destabilize the Middle East, still destabilized at this point, 22 years later. Led us into a war. You had pro-war protests back then. Kind of. Well, no, you had there was a big anti-war protest because people knew that we were being lied to. It was obvious. Yeah. New York Times. There you go. I wonder what the New York Times is saying about today. I bet you they're saying troops on the ground. Great idea. New York Times. I might not be able to get on. I think they're paywalled pretty bad. Trump says Zelensky doesn't want there to be peace. Donald Trump has again attacked Volodymyr Zelensky after Ukraine president said en route to his country's war with Russia is still very far away. This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer. It is what I was saying. This guy doesn't want to be there to be peace, as long as he has America's backing. And Europe, in the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the U.S. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of a show of strength against Russia. I mean, what are they thinking? There you have it. And then he's also talking about how big news coming at the State of the Union tomorrow night. I'm going to speculate right now and say that he is going to just flat out come out and say that he is done with, that we won't come to NATO's defense if they start this war. You tell me why I have to go here to get this information. What are they doing? A prayer request. You can request a prayer for someone if you want. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announces UK troops will be boots on the ground in Ukraine, leading a European coalition of the willing. And that means World War III, probably. It means a major war in Europe, at least. I don't think Russia's going to play kindly with that. And we're not going to come to the European Union's defense. They should realize at this point that President Trump is making that pretty clear that we're not going to do it. And some people are saying, well, if the European Union or if NATO member states put troops on the ground in Ukraine and they're attacked, that means Article 5 will be triggered. Incorrect. Article 5 is only triggered if a NATO member state is attacked directly. But if they place NATO troops in Ukraine and those troops are attacked in Ukraine because Ukraine is not a member of NATO, Article 5 does not get triggered. Very important distinction here. Very important. Which means that, I mean, they could just turn into Thunderdome in Ukraine. Just EU pouring in troops, Russia pouring in troops. Although I feel like at some point, Russia's gonna just, I don't know. I don't know what their political situation is right now. I don't know if they have enough to fight the EU on their own. I mean, they do have an alliance with China as well. And of course, they have North Korean troops that they've been using, reportedly just as, cannon fodder. But they are using North Korean troops. So if this war kicks off in Europe, and I think it will soon, depending on what happens in the State of the Union address tomorrow, I think Trump kind of holds the cards right now. If he says he wants to go his own way, he's going to go his own way. If he says he wants to stay with the European Union and back them in this war, then we might be going to war with Russia, potentially. I don't think you can put troops and planes in Ukraine. This isn't Libya. Okay? This isn't Syria. This isn't anywhere else where you've tried this strategy before. Those countries didn't have 4,000 nuclear warheads. Russia does. And do they actually have that many that are functional right now? Probably not. I mean, I think that's their Cold War total, but I doubt they've upkept all those. They're probably a bunch just like rotting somewhere in some field in Kazakhstan. What does this mean? Can it be stopped? I don't think so. It's becoming a World War II playbook. The Europeans are afraid that if they choose the path of appeasement like they did during World War II, that it's not going to happen. That Vladimir Putin and Russia aren't going to respect it, and that they're going to break a ceasefire or a peace deal and reinvade Ukraine and then possibly continue moving on from there. I don't know. I don't think that the Europeans have a great army right now or, good military, any of them, because they've been relying on the United States for security for a long time. So they haven't been spending much money. Would make me think that they might not be equipped to defend from a ground war against a nation such as Russia that does have manufacturing abilities, production abilities, and is able really to turn things out and just get things going. But there's also, Russia's lost a ton of vehicles and it just has really struggled, I think, with production and getting good quality military equipment on the ground. Now, I don't know, but I think that we'll see China step up big time. Why wouldn't China want to take out Europe like this without having to directly fight the United States? It would also make a Taiwanese invasion or a Chinese invasion of Taiwan easier as well if the U.S. breaks away from NATO, is no longer allied with NATO. Means the U.S. is probably less likely to. I mean, it immediately says isolationism. If you want to look at it from a historical perspective, if the U.S. leaves NATO, which is what we did, it's what we were doing during World War II. We were isolationists, pretty much from when the Spanish-American War onwards. I mean, we did World War One, but that was like we came in at the last minute, you know, and that was more to defend, I think, Britain than anything else, because they were still a fairly powerful empire, an empire in decline, but you needed to be friends with them in order to take over their mantle. Now we're isolationists again. We've readopted that policy of letting the world kind of fight out their differences amongst themselves, and we're gonna chill over here because we got these two giant, beautiful oceans surrounding us, and like 12 aircraft carriers. I think we have more still than the rest of the world combined. That's the main reason why we're the global superpower and military power, is because of our aircraft carriers. It's not the nuclear weapons. It's not the UFOs, space weapons, supersonic missiles. Nope, it's the aircraft carriers. We can basically be a pop-up military nation force anywhere we want in the world. Just like that. We just got to send them over. It's impressive. And that's why you've seen a lot of other countries try to build aircraft carriers and as much as possible over the past 10, 20 years. But they're playing catch up at this point. I mean, China's got some decent ones, I'm pretty sure. And I think, no, France has a couple of good ones too. Britain, maybe. But there's not many out there. We have most of them. Why everyone wants to be our friend and doesn't want to be our enemy. Well, if the proposal is boots on the ground and planes in the air, I think they're going to get this back from President Trump. We're just not going to do it. It's suicide. I think this is suicide by the European Union. Truly. I have no idea why they would do this, other than trying to reboot their economies through the military-industrial complex. Because they do have stagnant economies. They're in a lot of debt. I think that's probably the main reason why you would see them pursue this war against Russia, is they need the money. I'm increasingly no longer buying the, well, Putin's Hitler and he's going to just keep invading. I mean, yeah, he talks about righting historical wrongs, and that does lead one to believe that maybe he would be talking about restoring the Soviet Union, going into the Iron Curtain, reestablishing the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe. He did talk a lot about righting historical wrongs prior to the Ukraine invasion. But I think you need to give him a chance. I don't know. I would think that they, at this point, would want peace, Russia. Been dragging on for 3 years. They thought it was going to be over in 3 days, a week. Now, politics are different in Russia. There's a lot of graft. There's a lot of corruption. The oligarchs have a lot of power. I mean, they do here too, but even more so in Russia. So it's possible that they're divided, and maybe that's, part of the country wants to keep going and part of the country doesn't want to keep going. I haven't honestly read up as much on what Russia thinks in this as I probably should. And maybe we'll do some research on that before we come back on Thursday with a new afternoon coffee at 1 o'clock on Rumble. So it's entirely possible that they're really going to do this and put boots on the ground and planes in the air. And that's going to be a major European war. Tune into the State of the Union tomorrow night. You're going to see things will become clear, I think, when that happens. I think you're going to see President Trump come out and say that we're just not going to do this. This is off the table at this point. We're not going to put troops on the ground, planes in the air. And that if the European Union and the NATO allies want to do that, then they can have fun. Here's the thing, just because we're a part of NATO, and just because a NATO country gets attacked, right, which would trigger Article 5. Now, again, if there's NATO troops in Ukraine and those troops get attacked in Ukraine, that doesn't trigger Article 5. We don't have to defend Ukraine, those troops in Ukraine. The NATO troops have to be attacked inside a NATO country for Article 5 to be triggered. Even if that happens, President Trump is the commander-in-chief of the military. He doesn't have to send any troops anywhere to defend anyone if he doesn't want to. I don't know what to tell you. There are people who think that that is not true. That is 100% true. He doesn't have to defend anyone. Final thoughts, wrap up on this historic precipice that we rest on. Looking forward, I think tomorrow night, the State of the Union is going to really tell us what direction this all heads in. I really have a feeling you're going to see President Trump possibly announce that we're going to withdraw military support for Ukraine, military funding. I can entirely see it. Just flat out, we're not going to do it. He's a tough negotiator. He wrote The Art of the Deal. He knows what he's doing. He knows that a war in Europe between Russia, the EU, and the Commonwealth would be incredibly destructive. Potentially game over, apocalypse, end times. So he wants to avoid that. I think if it is inevitable, and it really seems like it is, I mean, it seems like Starmer, traditionally, or at least for the, past 100, 200 years, Europe goes the way of Britain, right? And Starmer is saying troops on the ground and planes in the air. That's going to mean a major war. At the very least, if that's inevitable, you want to avoid it and just stay out of it. Stay out of it. We have a whole ocean separating us. Let them fight it out. It's unfortunate. It's sad. Millions of souls will pass. It's going to be tragic. But it's not. Why risk the safety of Americans by siding with these psychopaths, warmongers? I mean, what else can you say about these European leaders pushing for this war right now? If you are able to get a treaty that resolves, I mean, part of this is that we don't do treaties anymore, right? It's ceasefires. Whatever happened to ending wars, like ending them, right? Now it's just ceasefires. Like, we just stopped the war for like 100 years, And I think of North Korea, South Korea. They're still technically at war. They just have a ceasefire in place. We need to have a peace treaty, like an actual peace treaty that ends the war and that moves us forward and establishes peace amongst the Western world. I mean, this is the first time since World War II that the Western world's really been at the breaking point and a point of going to war with each other, within each other. Most of the past conflicts have been, or the past 60, 70 years have either been an empire going to war against a little guy or two little guys kind of battling it out. Or like a revolution, rebellion, something like that. If you have a higher power you pray to, it's about time, I think. And if you don't, maybe start looking for one. Because it's going to get crazy. And not the good kind of crazy. The bad kind of crazy. Polish PM Donald Tusk. 500 million Europeans are asking 300 million Americans to defend them against 140 million Russians. Those numbers don't add up. I've said for a while that the Ukraine war is kind of a money laundering scheme. It's a convenient money laundering scheme because Ukraine was being used as the money laundering state prior to the war. And now that you have the war happening, it was even like more money laundering was being done because you just have billions and billions and billions of dollars passing through it. So it's easy to slip some more in there. The bioweapons thing, I mean, wouldn't it be wild if we actually find out that COVID came from Ukraine and not China? Like super, you want to go deep conspiracy? Why else would they have the war? You got to destroy that bioweapon lab, right? A little Russian shelling. No, that's just wild and reckless speculation on the afternoon coffee show. We shouldn't do that, right? That would be bad. That's what the news does every day. We're a comedy satirical podcast. We're not news. Never have claimed to be news. I will be back. I'm going to rewatch the broadcast to see what the quality is like on Rumble, but I think we're going to do Rumble from here on forward. I'll be back at 1 o'clock on Thursday this week with a brand new afternoon coffee. We're going to keep tracking this situation. Possibly I might come back tomorrow night or Wednesday with some State of the Union action. If things go as I think they might go, and we do get a departure from NATO and all those shenanigans, Trump says we're not sending troops, Europe's on their own, then I might come in and just kind of get my thoughts late tomorrow night, probably after the State of the Union. So keep an eye out for that. This has been Afternoon Coffee on Rumble. Thank you so much. Hope you have a wonderful day, Internet world. Love you. I'm out.